Welcome to Two Crazy Scoops, the weekend coffee break with your hosts, AO and Antino. Grab your favorite mug and your favorite coffee, and if you don't drink coffee, then please stop listening now. Talking about alienating our audience. So AO has to stop listening to this immediately because he himself does not drink coffee.
No, I don't drink coffee, but I do drink tea, so that works. Green tea, matcha to be exact. That
So,
will put hair on your chest.
so this week, we have the coffee break episodes. We didn't really talk too much about what we're going to do with those, but today we will, because here we are. I think these are going to come out Saturday morning, so enjoy. But we're going to Anchor, the app that we use, has a new feature where we can add songs to our podcast. So the difference is that you'll only be able to listen to these episodes on Spotify. And if you have Spotify Premium, you'll be able to hear the whole song. If not, you'll only be able to listen to 30 seconds of it. Hopefully the song will be at the end of the episode. And it's just so we're going to be discussing different music that we like. Maybe sharing some things that either I or Aaron aren't too familiar with. And then we'll discuss that, our opinions, our thoughts. So enjoy. I think... How are you doing, Aaron?
I'm great.
Would you say you're fantastic?
No.
6'1" and tons of fun.
I am 6'1".
Yes.
That's really strange that works. So this week we are going to be talking about Bob Dylan, one of my favorite artists to hate on.
To hate on. So I think in our last episode we talked a little bit about the differences between his voice in albums.
Mm-hmm.
I shared with you one, and that album actually I think is the only one that he sounds like that in.
And he actually sounded okay. I could listen to that. But a lot of his big songs, part of the problem is that I heard covers first before I heard the original. But second, he does. Even though I did like his voice in that particular song, and I'm sure the rest of that album that you sent me, as a general rule, I don't really care for his voice that much. And so when I hear his songs, if I can ignore the voice and listen to the lyrics, I usually like the song. And like I mentioned to you before, I think Bob Dylan, he can write a great song, but I view his versions of the song as templates, and everyone else takes the template and really builds upon it. So, and that's why I feel like a lot of the covers of his songs are great, but the original versions, it's just kind of like blah.
So I looked up the song you're talking about, "To Make You Feel My Love."
Mm-hmm.
And that was actually written by Bob Dylan and recorded by Billy Joel. And then eventually he recorded it in like 97.
Really?
Yeah. So it was first released as Billy Joel singing.
Oh, so that was the original version of the song. See, I thought so that I didn't know. I thought Bob Dylan recorded it and released it first, and then Billy Joel came later. But he actually wrote the song for Billy Joel, basically.
Yes.
And then
I also found a version of Garth Brooks singing it.
Oh, okay.
So if you're a Brooks and Dunn fan, Garth Brooks fan or something. It's on YouTube, though. You can't find it on Spotify. It was like, I was looking up information about it online, and it just mentioned people who had covered it. And that was one of the names that kind of stuck out to me because I was like, that's kind of odd. I never heard of his version of that.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Well, that's new to me. So I learned something. Now, of course, my favorite version that I know of so far of that song is Adele. She covers it for her 19 album, which is her first album. And that was the album, even though it did pretty decently, she didn't blow up from that album. It was a nice album. And that was the only cover she did on it. And I like it.
I listened to it and I had heard it before. I didn't think I had.
Mm-hmm. Her version?
Yeah.
Yeah, she does a really good job, on the cover. It's a really nice song. So, yeah, great songwriter, but...
So I think of the songs that he's written, And you listen to one of them. One of them that I do like, which is just more of like my own personal taste, is the Hard Times in New York Town.
Hmm.
That was one that I heard, but I heard it while I was driving. It was like 91.3 plays music every now and then, like just random tracks that are on records or stuff like that.
Hmm.
Because I think this is like a demo. So whenever like an artist releases an album, they'll usually play it on there.
Hmm.
And these were just demos, so they got released later on. I think when I look at it, it was 91. So these songs were originally recorded like in 1969.
Okay.
So
And I'm looking at his like some of the songs that he's written, and some of them I forgot that he actually wrote. Um,
I think one of the most extreme cases is All Along the Watchtower.
yes, because you always associate that with Jimi Hendrix.
Even just culturally, if you watch a movie about the 70s, they always play that song. And
Hmm.
it's always the Jimi Hendrix version.
Hmm.
And they're like, there's a bunch of hippies here.
Yeah, you said Hendrix version,
Yeah.
right? It's so it's like so intertwined with him that that's who I think of. I don't think of Bob Dylan, but
Yeah.
you know, you know what it is too. A lot of times when people cover his songs, at least when it comes to, I think the more popular scene, I think a lot of the songs blow up more when other artists cover his songs. Because I don't know how big a hit the original version was, but Hendrix took that song and really brought it to life. Um,
Made it a completely different song.
yeah, and that's why I said, a lot of people, Bob, he really creates a really good template, and people, because when you think about it, anyone can take us. I shouldn't say anyone, but if you have some talent, you can take a song that's already written and kind of make it your own and kind of build elements. And, he always wrote his songs. They were very broken down. They were acoustic, a lot of them, and so it leaves a lot of room to really build up on it.
Uh-huh.
The different layers of instrumentation you can build on top of it. Or in Hendrix's case, he made quite a few changes to it, and um, I
I
think
think,
that make the songs really good. But obviously, if that template is not good, then you can't really do nothing with it. I don't think.
well, another thing I'll mention too is that Bob Dylan, a lot of his music was music for the times. It wasn't
That's
so much anything that you would not say that you're interested in those topics now, obviously, but for that time, it was a pretty big deal.
No, you're absolutely right, and that's funny you mentioned that because I was talking to someone about that before, and long story short, that was the kind of the conclusion that we came to. It's the time that you're living in, because when I'm sure when he sat down and wrote those songs, he's not thinking about my demographic,
Hmm.
mainly because number one, I wasn't alive then for most of them. But he wasn't thinking like, "Oh, this is going to be a good R&B song." No, he was writing for the times of what was going through, and that's why and obviously that's why so many people love him. You know, that generation who was around, during that time, and the younger generation too. Um, but especially the generation who was around during those times, obviously they would have connected with that music more. So it makes
Yeah.
sense. It makes sense that I wouldn't necessarily, understand it. Um, but again, I appreciate a good song, and like I said, I never denied his talent. But I think the versions that he did versus the versions that some of the other artists have done, I think they brought it up to the times.
Well, it's just like the storytelling. There is a song called Tangled Up in Blue,
Hmm.
and that one kind of tells a story poetically.
Hmm.
And so it's kind of like at the time, folk music was pretty popular.
Hmm.
And so that was like the best of the folk music for the time,
Right, got that makes sense.
which is kind of funny. So if you're not into folk music, I went to a folk festival one time. It was just very odd, but they had one in Tucson here. But it's changed a lot over time.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not. I wouldn't consider myself to be a folk music fan, but I do. One thing I figured out about myself is that I do like live music. So even if it's from a genre that I wouldn't probably normally listen to, the fact that it's live, for some reason that changes it for me, and I can't explain that. But I like live music, even if I don't, not crazy about the genre in and of
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying because you kind of see the authenticity of the person who's singing it because
yeah,
there's no in between of what can you say, like production.
right. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
overproduced. There's no auto tune. You get to see the pure raw talent
Uh huh.
of the artist. And a lot of times they play their own instruments or they have a really good talented band with them. And those are things that I don't know, something about live music. It doesn't translate over well to even, obviously we listen to recorded music, but when the artist is actually talented, it doesn't translate as well until you hear it live.
Yeah.
Something about live music. Even now, it's funny. I found myself like if I hear an artist perform a live version of the song, a lot of times I'll go and find that on YouTube and listen to that version versus the recorded version. A lot of times, if I can find it, just
Yeah.
because nothing beats live music. So
And that's another thing too is that his sound changed over time. So he went from playing folk music to like, playing the electric guitar, which apparently was a huge deal for people. So much so that they booed and like were very upset,
yeah,
which is kind of funny today. I don't think you have that strong of a reaction when an artist tries to change directions.
I I think you do have it, but it's a little different. I think music has progressed so much because you look at the leap that he did going from acoustic to electric, that was a big thing. Whereas now, um, artists, a lot of the music is electronically produced. It's drum machines and stuff a lot of times, depending on what kind of music. But when you're talking about pop, for example,
Hmm.
it's all electronic music anyway. So the jump from them doing one thing to another a lot of times isn't as shocking, I guess, as it was back then. But you do have artists who you follow for years and they change their sound up, you know.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we'll say like, oh, their first album was great, but the other stuff they put out was trash. Like just an example is like Maroon 5. I think we talked about that.
Yeah.
That first album, to me, I thought that was one of the few albums I can listen to every song on. But
There's a live version of that album too that I really enjoy.
yeah, yeah.
It's
They
like an acoustic actually.
Yeah, they re-released it, and they even included some of the demos. I think.
Yeah, they play a Beatles song. Um, I forget what song it is, but it's a really like. Oh, it's. I think it's called "If I Fell." That's what it is.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
I love that song too. Yeah. And but as time went on, their music became more and more overproduced.
Uh huh.
So I think there's modern examples of that too. Of course, Maroon 5 is no Bob Dylan, so the outcry wasn't as huge. Obviously, you know, I
But
think he's attained to what people would say legendary status.
yeah, well, I think you really have to. I don't want to say that poetry is dead, but it's just not the same as it used to be.
True, I agree.
I don't think the format. I mean, this is speaking from my experience.
Right.
I'm not very interested in poetry very much, and the lyrical content of songs nowadays is just diminished greatly. You can find good lines here and there, but to write a whole song out that does not repeat itself constantly, but has like meaning to it, is kind of hard to come across.
I agree 100%. Especially when you're talking about pop.
Yeah.
Especially because pop music used to back in the day, even though it was pop, it still had meaning. It still at least told a story.
Hmm.
Not so much anymore. But you can still find good music out there, but you got to search a little harder nowadays. It's usually not the
Well,
pop.
that's why I'm saying if you want good music, you can always go back in time.
True.
I
Yeah.
think sometimes you kind of blow it off. I can understand if you don't like his voice because I hate the Postal Service and Death Cab for Cutie. I'm sorry. I mean, they could have good music, but I cannot stand his voice for anything.
Well,
There's one song called "I Will Possess Your Heart," and I really like that by Death Cab for Cutie.
that one sounds
It's like a
scary.
9-minute song,
Oh, okay.
but yeah, it's just I can't do it. His voice just I can't. And people love him, and they get mad at me for not liking it. I'm like, I'm sorry.
Well, actually, with Def Cap, I can understand what you're saying about his voice because I'm not crazy about his voice either. But Postal Service, come on,
It's the same singer.
it's the same singer.
Yeah.
Oh,
Fwah, fwah.
and there you have it, the coffee break with two crazy scoops. Tune in next week for another episode where we will talk about somebody else.
Somebody
This is
else.
AO and Antino. Check
Yep.
it out.
And we'll put the song at the end of the episode.